Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm creating some happy meal using the Beary Rainy Day from Lawn Fawn and the Henry's ABCs. Aside from those two incredible new products that I got, I'm also using the Petite Gingham paper pad for my favorite things. As you know, my favorite pattern paper out there, so any occasion I can use it, I will. And today is a new occasion. So I die cut an A2 sized panel using the basic rectangles from my elephant, and I'm first starting with my background today. Therefore I took some blue distress inks. Today I'm using Tumbled gloss, faded jeans, and I also ended up using chipped sapphire. And I'm just going to blend a gradient on top of my background. Now I sped this up quite a bit because it took me quite a bit of time to get this background on there. So I just went back and forth, started really light, and I built up the amount of ink on top of my panel. Whenever I am creating a gradient in the same color family, I tend to use one blending brush for the complete panel. So here I will also do that. I'm using the same blending brush for my tumbled gloss, my chipped sapphire, but also my faded jeans. Using the same brush also in a way helps me to get that mid-tone whenever I am going from one color to the other, because there is still some residue on that brush. So here I added my darker blue, and then I went back to my mid-tone blue and I just blended it out, then went to the tumbled gloss and just keep going back and forth until you're happy with the blend. That's the most important thing. You just keep going, just keep going. And on the bottom of this panel I'm not adding anything. I like the idea of just fading into the white and then let everyone think for himself that the white area, for example, is grounding, or it's snow, or it's rain, or anything you want. Just keep it up and just leave it all to the illusion of everyone and the imagination. So I decided to also add a bit of splatters, not a lot, but I added a bit of chipped sapphire and tumbled gloss in the background. I also ended up using a bit of white gouache. It's something that I normally use for stars and for snow, but you can definitely also use it for a rainy background, as I'm doing here. I also didn't clean my paintbrush, so it went a bit into the light blue white sort of color. And I'm just adding it all over this panel. Once I did that, I had to clean off my work surface and then I could start on the coloring of my images. I decided to keep the coloring quite simple, as I always try to do. I'm reusing colors as much as possible, so both bears will be, well, in yellow and red, except that I will switch it up and the boots from the one bear will be red, the other one will have a red coat, and then the yellow the same way around. So I'm doing that. If by any chance in the future you want to revisit these color combinations without having to rewatch the video, there is always a blog post that is accompanying my video, so you can always just go to the blog post and check the color combinations there. I'm trying to list them every time as clear as possible for each one of the combinations. So for the coloring of both bears, I decided to have the bigger one a bit darker than the smaller one, but I'm just adding one marker on top of my combination to get that result. So here my darkest marker is E34, and I will end up using E37 if I'm not mistaken for the bigger one, and then also E34, also E53 and E51 wherever I need to. And that's just the only addition that I did. So in the end, if you just have these 4 markers, you already have 2 combinations that I'm using here, but you can make more out of them, definitely. So again, starting with my darkest, working my way to my lightest. I'm also trying to have the shadows every time on the side that is, well, where their back is facing towards. So the front of the bears are every time in the center of the light. Well, the light source is every time glowing on top of the face of the images. So the little bear is facing towards the right, so on the right side of the image we have the light source and so the lightest markers. The bigger bear is facing towards the left, so on the left side you have the light source, there are the lighter markers, and on the right side you have the shadows. And then for the frogs, I did a centered light source because they are well facing towards us. So we have the shadows there on the sides of the frogs. So here for the red combination, since the image is quite a little bigger from the bigger bear than the boots from the small bear, I added one extra marker for this combination. So normally I sort of have 3 markers on every combination that I use, but depending on the size it can be handy to have a 4th marker, 5th marker. You don't need to. There is definitely a way around it just by using 3, and even if you have only 2 markers that can still work, but I just find it easy whenever I have a bigger image to maybe use an extra marker just to help me keep the interest high and just play with 4 markers instead of 3. Going now in for a second layer. Personally, that is for me all the difference on top of this Transotype perfect coloring paper. Sometimes I need more, but 2 at least. So I'm working my way through my lightest marker, and personally I find the moment that you added your darkest, it's really easy to work your way towards the lightest because you just have to add the next marker every time just all around where you added the marker before. And that's how you color a complete image. Decided to give it some yellow buttons. You can also give the bear some pants if you want to, but I was just thinking about Winnie the Pooh and bears like that just have sort of a t-shirt, so that's why I left their legs bare in this case. So for the water I decided to just use a few light blue markers, sort of trying to recreate that tumbled gloss that I used in the background. And then the frogs I'm going to do in my favorite green combination, a really bright one. And as I said, shadows on both left and right side because he or she is facing towards us. And once these are done, I am completely done with the coloring of all of my images. And then I can die cut everything out using the matching dies. Next up, it was time to play a bit with the idea of a sentiment, and I decided that I wanted to use the Henry's ABCs. I think we can all agree upon the fact that this alphabet die set is just so much fun. It's a really playful alphabet set. So I thought about sentiments, and since I have all of this space on the top of my card left over, I decided upon rainy hugs. I really love punny sentiments and just including the fact that there is rain and the bears are having their jackets on. I thought that rainy hugs was a nice idea. We can all use a hug from now and then, and there are some people currently that can really use a huge hug. So why not create a bit of happy mail today? And you know, there might be someone around you that can really use a hug right now, but you can't see them, so then we send a card. So I cut the rainy hugs letters out, twice out of white cardstock and once out of the Henry's, well no, once out of the Petite Gingham paper pad, just to have that on the top. And then I slightly offset the Petite Gingham paper ABCs of the white one so that I had a white shadow layer sort of. Since I have my white stitching details preserved, I thought it was a nice idea to just have that white return in my sentiment as well. But before adding that, I decided to add a bit of glossy on all of the splatters that I have on the bottom of my card. Because my images will slightly overlap with them, so otherwise it would be a bit of a struggle later on to add it. Next up, it's time to add the images. I'm going to use some thin foam squares on the back of them, and then once they are on top of my panel, I can see how much space I still have for my sentiment. So I'm going to cover as much as possible from the back of these images with foam, well, with my foam squares here, just to help my card during mailing, that it won't be ruined by the amount of letters that the mailman is delivering that day. So once I remove the backings, I'm trying to center these images as much as possible in between these two splashes of water that I have there. Like that. And then we can play a bit with the sentiment and the spacing of the sentiment. So I didn't want it all to be straight, so I'm just loosey-goosey adding the letters on top of my panel. I did, however, want them to be sort of centered on this background. And then I'm using some present seal to lift everything up together. I'm tracing the corners of my panel over there so that I have the same spacing later on, but I'm adding it back on there. But since I have the present seal, I can easily turn this around and just add my glue on the back. I'm going to use my fingertip to sort of spread the glue so that it won't be oozing from underneath my sentiment, and then I will place it on top of my panel. Like that, and I decided to just add my acrylic block on top of it, and once that had some time to dry, I removed the present seal. And then we still have those raindrops that we colored in, we still have the frogs that we can use. So let's play a bit with that. So there are many ways to add the frogs. You can let them jump from the edges inside of the card. You can play with the several letters that you have in a sentiment to add the frogs on top. In the end, I ended up adding a frog right aside the S and a frog in the center in between my two images as well. And for the raindrops, I decided to scatter them a bit around. And once I was happy with placement of all of these items, I adhered them as well. I think it would also have been really cool to have more raindrops to scatter, but I just didn't have enough space on the piece of paper where I was coloring on. Another thing that you could do is to white heat emboss the raindrops all over, or just draw them in yourself, or there are also rain droplets out there as embellishments. That would be nice as well. But I colored these, so I really wanted to use them. And these frogs are just too cute to not add on the card. So I'm going to add everything straight on top of my panel except for this frog that I'm now handling, because it's overlapping that S, and as you know I had 3 layers of cardstock there, so it's just a bit too high to just add it with liquid glue. So I'm adding a bit of thin foam squares on one edge and then the other edge is overhanging. and then the rest I will add with some liquid glue. For the raindrops, I found it really handy to have an embellishment wand because it's like embellishments. It wasn't really easy to grab yourself. And then since I added glossy accents on those splashes on the bottom of the card, I will later on also add glossy accents on top of the raindrops, but I will first add it on top of a card base, the panel, before adding more glossy accents, because you can get into the glossy accents with your fingers, and I had that way too many times already to try that again and test my luck again. So I'm adding it as straight as possible here, and then we will add more glossy accents. Because I first thought only to do it on top of the rain parts, but then I thought, well, why don't I add it to the sentiment? And so I started adding glossy accents all over the sentiment of my card. Once I went over every letter, I just finished these letters off by going over some areas where I went outside of, well, not the lines, but you know what I mean. I went outside of the area of the pattern paper. I just fixed that with my craft knife, with my embellishment wand, wherever I needed to go, just to get it clean and crisp. And then this card is completely finished. I really love how this background turned out and how well the pattern paper goes with the blues from the background. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you like the end result. If you do, you can always give this video a thumbs up. I would truly appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I want to thank you all again for stopping by and taking the time to watch this video, and I wish you an incredible day. Bye!